What's up, bosses? This is JoeMan543, and here I'm going to have my full, in-depth review of DrkSteel's Halo Reach mod. We like to call it Cursed Halo Reach. Now, I haven't done one of these review videos before, so I'm going to try and keep things somewhat organized. I've split things into 10 parts. We have weapons, vehicles, armor abilities, maps, firefight, forge, campaign, enemies, gameplay, and any glitches and bugs. Glitches and bugs are one item. That makes 10 items, which is hopefully going to make this pretty organized. And I'm also going to apply a percentage to each category for how well I think it was done. And this video will have two sections. The first section I just rate it as is, not comparing it to anything outside. And in the second section I will compare it to Inferno Plus's Halo Combat Evolved Cursed mod. I will also list the times here, so you can go to any point in the video if you care particularly about that. But for the full review, I recommend watching the whole thing, of course. Do what you want, though. You're the viewer. Let's go. When it comes to weapons, and pretty much all the things that you can use to hurt and kill enemies, or friends if you're that kind of player, we have 26 of them, which conveniently is how many letters there are in the alphabet. So we have A to Z. The plasma pistol is the same, unless you charge it up for 30 seconds. That's a kind of a long time. But then when you release it, it'll cause a giant explosion. I like to call it a nuke, even though it's not thermonuclear, but whatever. It'll shoot a charged projectile that makes a giant explosion, and it kills pretty much anything that's within, 100 meters of it. However, it only takes 10% of the battery life of the plasma pistol, so it's pretty much the same from the base game. The plasma rifle that elites usually wield is now supersized. It's much larger and also fires larger projectiles which explode on impact, and it's very good at crowd control. Very good at pretty much killing anything. It's a great weapon if you can get it in the game. The plasma launcher, the thing that's supposed to shoot 4 plasma grenades, well, it shoots them and then they immediately go onto the ground, bounce for 4 seconds or so, and then they explode. And they also explode whenever they bounce. It's kind of an interesting thing to use. You have to be on some sort of ledge to effectively use it. And when I say effectively use it, I mean just not die using it. There's not really an easy way to use it effectively against anything. You just kind of use it, wonder and amazement, and then get another gun. The plasma repeater, which we saw a lot of when we boarded the Covenant ship, that one shoots really fast, and once you press the trigger, it'll just continue firing even if you let go, and it'll shoot until it's empty. That is, unless you interrupt it somehow, like using a melee attack. Kind of a cool concept, but it doesn't do any extra damage or have anything too interesting about it, so you'll probably still want to look for another gun. The DMR, which is one of my favorite guns in the base game, now has a 300 millisecond delay. So if you shoot a grunt in the head and within 300 milliseconds, or 3/10 of a second, that grunt moves somewhere else, well, you just missed. Again, a pretty interesting idea, but you're probably going to want to look for a different gun because this one is pretty hard to use. Your enemy's probably not going to stay in the same place for that long. And then we have the assault rifle. Pretty normal gun everyone's used to. Not too bad. It just shoots some sort of energy ball projectiles, and it's called the Star Wars Blaster. It does have infinite ammo, but it does heat up if you shoot too much, so you have to be careful of that, otherwise it'll stop shooting and then sucks to be you. This one's pretty alright. I'll use it in combat. Not the best, but it's good enough I'll use it. The Magnum, or the pistol, as you probably know better, is now half size and only does 1 damage when you shoot enemies with it. It's based on a pistol called the Calibri, which is some little old pistol from back in the 1900s. It is useless, let me tell ya. Okay, not entirely useless, but anything besides a jackal or a grunt, you're not going to be able to take them down. And even a jackal or a grunt, you're probably better off just going up and punching them. The rocket launcher shoots backwards. What else can I say? The sniper rifle. It's only effective for about 5 feet in front of you. And even then, it's not really that great. The shotgun supposedly shoots a laser projectile that detonates and will launch your enemy backwards, But I played through the whole campaign and did some firefight matches and still never got anything like that, so the shotgun is somewhere between regular and not very good. The grenade launcher shoots a frag grenade about 2 feet in front of you, and the grenades, as we know, have a random timer on them, so it might explode right when it comes out of the gun. It might explode, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds later. I can't be bothered to count. Way too late to be useful, and not far enough to be very useful. The Spartan laser is just a laser pointer. It doesn't actually charge up, so it doesn't actually shoot. It just makes a laser. That's it. The fuel rod gun, the things that the hunters normally wield, bounces. Who designs a gun that bounces? This is the worst gun ever, of all time. Really, it's not that different. It's still pretty useful, but it doesn't come up very often, so you probably won't have many opportunities to use it. Plasma turret. Supposedly, it's a magical girl gun. The concussion rifle, which is normally pretty useful in the normal game for crowd control, it still fires the same projectile, but it shakes the screen so much that it's pretty much not worth using. Also, if the enemy uses it, it shakes your screen a lot too. But they don't have a screen, so you firing it on them doesn't really have a detrimental effect. Not anything more than usual, anyway. The gravity hammer works the exact same, except it's a tree branch instead of a hammer. Pretty clever switch out there, I like it. The energy sword just makes you stab yourself and die. It's something called seppuku, I don't know, it's Japanese. You die. The needler just shoots everywhere. Awesome. The needle rifle shoots a needle like normal, but it goes a lot slower. However, it detonates on impact, so you can get some pretty good explosives if you fire a big group of them. The target designator, that normally calls in an airstrike, is now just a suicide vest. You use it, you die. The focus rifle is mostly the same, but it does a lot more damage, and you have to kind of recoil when you use it. The spiker basically shoots spikes, and when they hit an enemy, the enemy has spikes sticking out of them. That makes them kind of look like a hedgehog, right? The human turret is apparently now a jet engine that yeets you into oblivion. But whenever I tried using the human turret, it pretty much fired the same. Since there's no forge, I didn't have an opportunity to test the golf club, but the note says that everything is a golf ball. Since the golf club is only something that's in forge, not only can I not test it, that's the only place you would really have use of it, so yeah. Plasma grenades are apparently now dodgeballs. If you do hit an enemy with it, they take a tiny bit of damage. If you get hit, you take a tiny bit of damage. And that's about it. They don't explode, they don't separate, they don't do anything really. Frag grenades are pretty much the same, except that they have a random time instead of detonating pretty consistently. So it might detonate right when it leaves your hand, which is very annoying, or it might detonate after sitting on the ground for 10 seconds. Also still pretty annoying. It doesn't have any special effects with it, it just has a random timer. So overall, there are some good weapons. I think the plasma rifle is probably my favorite one, because of the crowd control you can do with it. Sending lots of explosive projectiles down, pretty nice. My least favorite weapon is kind of hard to choose, because there are a number on here that either don't do anything or just straight up kill you. I'm not sure, I'll just say like half of them are my least favorite. That's about it. For the weapons category, I'm going to give a score of 5 out of 10. There are some weapons that are pretty cool. On the other hand, it seems like there are a number of them that either don't do anything or kill you or really just aren't very effective. Not to mention, it took every weapon in the game and redid that weapon for these different effects, but it has only the weapons in the game, no additions, no special things added in. So considering the good ones and the bad ones, it seems about half and half, so I'm just giving it 5 out of 10. I feel like that's fair, that's my opinion. Feel free to post yours in the comments. Moving on to vehicles. There aren't nearly as many vehicles as there are weapons. That would be kind of insane. We'll start with the Wraith. The Wraith is pretty much the same, just that its projectile is a bunch of hearts instead of, you know, purpley energy stuff. The Mongoose is about half size, it's just tiny, and it slides around a bit more than the regular mongoose, but functionally it's pretty much the same. The ghost is supposedly supposed to be just like Halo 1's ghost, so that means that the boosting ability is completely removed, and shooting is just all over the place. Don't remember Combat Evolved's ghost being that inaccurate, but okay. The rocket warthog is now several warthogs stacked on top of each other. You drive the bottom one, and people can get in the middle ones, and on the top you have the rockets. In the mod it was called the Warthog Bus, but I hadn't read the thing yet, so we called it the Leaning Tower of Warthog. The other type of warthog, the chain gun hog, the one that shoots bullets, it's just really bouncy, the wheels specifically. So if you want to drive it, well, that's fun, right? The Banshee,
hello there,
is pretty much the same, except that it has some big pieces on it. The Revenant is probably my second favorite vehicle on this list because you can continuously fire it, and the shots are like they are in the normal game, so decent explosion. So you just send a flurry of those at the enemy and it takes care of them pretty well. The Saber, the thing you fly in space, is seemingly the same, except you don't have rockets. That's all I could notice about it. The note says that the controls are inverted, but I didn't notice any of that. Maybe I inverted the inversion, I don't know. In the mod notes for the Seraph it says the textures are missing. In the game they just never appeared, so I guess that's right. In other words, there's no Seraph. I never had an opportunity to try the Gauss Warthog. That's one that has the electric cannon thing on it. The note says that he replaced gasoline with pure crystal cocaine, heroin, and steroids. That sounds fun. The Falcon, don't get me started on these things, is basically slow, not easily controlled, and just worse. It's not better in any way, really. All civilian vehicles, so things like a truck, are stick shift. And despite me knowing how to press a clutch and choose a gear and let off and drive, that doesn't matter because Noble 6 doesn't know how to do that. So, all civilian vehicles are just not moving. The forklift and electric cart are pretty amazing, except I tried the electric cart on the Oni base level and it wouldn't let me drive it. So the forklift is amazing. Basically it's a forklift, except it can go up. You can fly. Flying forklifts, isn't that amazing? I think it's pretty awesome. Personally, the forklift is my favorite vehicle just because it's so unsuspecting that you can fly with it. That's all you can really do. It doesn't have any guns or any special things on it, but you can fly. And that's actually really awesome, in my opinion. Great addition to the game. In the vehicle section, we had some pretty good things, like the Revenant being able to shoot very quickly, and the forklift being able to fly. But we also had some not so good things, like the civilian truck not being able to drive anywhere, and the chain gun warthog just being so bouncy, it just bounces off the edge of the map or flips over, so you can't drive it. For the vehicles section, despite the other ones that don't work, I'm going to give vehicles 6 out of 10. Still has some room for improvement, some things could be better, but those vehicles were a fantastic idea in my opinion, so I'll give it that extra little bit so it's not quite as low as weapons. And now we come to the armor abilities. There are 7 armor abilities, the first one being Sprint. Now sprinting is something I was very used to using, but when you can sprint, it's unlimited. Until you stop, then you die. Apparently you have a heart attack. I didn't know heart attacks waited for you to stop exerting yourself, but that's how sprinting works. The jetpack is another case of just doesn't really work. The note says, "You're too heavy." Well, I guess that's kind of true. When you use the jetpack, you actually fall quicker than without using it. But yeah, it's just another case of not working. The drop shield drops a shield, but it's a Covenant style shield, not the big bubble shield. So a little less protection, and it also seems to drop it to the right of you, not where you're facing. So keep that in mind, I guess, if you want to use it. The evade ability lets you move quicker, but it also shakes the screen a crazy amount. This is something I feel does fit with a cursed mod, shaking the screen, but making it go faster. It's a trade-off of you want to move faster, but, you know, shaky. The armor lock is like normal armor lock, except there's no time limit on it. Also, if you jump from a high enough point and armor lock while in the air, when you hit the ground, you'll be able to move around, but armor lock is still turned on. So enemies don't shoot you, and you can just run around wherever you need to. You can't shoot them back or activate anything or really do anything that involves not your legs, but that doesn't matter, because you're invincible, right? Camouflage just makes you more visible. It doesn't do much. The hologram gives you friends! Well, the note says that it spawns an annoyance instead of a friend, but really, would a friend follow you around and push you and be your best fan ever and follow you like an army of robots? The hologram is another one I feel is perfect for the cursed category of mods. It's something that's just pretty wacky but can be useful, or you can just have fun with it. For armor abilities, it was mostly taking the pretty useful abilities and making them not so useful. Sprint kills you, jetpack doesn't work, drop shield drops a not as good shield, evade, you get dizzy, armor lock is good, I guess. Camo doesn't really do anything different, and hologram gives you friends. Friends are nice, but 3 out of 10. The next section is maps. The only notable change off the top of my head was with the Pillar of Autumn. On that level, besides not being able to play through it because you took a trip to Disneyland and that took all your time and the Pillar of Autumn left without you, the Pillar of Autumn isn't there. And even if you skipped points later in the level, it's still not there, so 9 out of 10 for maps. Next we have Firefight. Firefight is mostly the same, but there were a few maps made with the cursed mod added to them. But playing through them is still the basic premise of Firefight, you just have the cursed guns. Since some of the weapons don't actually do anything, and you have some of those weapons in Firefight, that's why I'm taking a couple points out of that. 8 out of 10 for Firefight. Next we have Forge. It doesn't exist for the Master Chief Collection, unfortunately, but the mod still made something for it, I just can't check it out. But that's not the mod maker's fault, so I won't dock any points there. 10 out of 10. And next we have the campaign. Now there were a lot of things changed about the game in the campaign. A few notable ones were the armors, especially George's armor. Most of the names of the other Spartans were also changed. George, for example, was Georges. Noble Actual was pretty much all the same. It was just super saturated, so if there was a red, oh boy was it red. And all the other colors. On Winter Contingency, you start out without guns, and then you have a couple of Gita right at the beginning, instead of having those bird thingies. Then there was also the civilians that Emil was going to scare, and then George was going to talk to, but that part just doesn't happen. There's also a few elites in the house with them. Not sure why. They don't really do anything in the house, they just stand there. Oni Sword Base was mostly the same, but there's a forklift and you can fly out of there, so that was pretty nice. And you can fly through most of the level, honestly. Nightfall was also pretty much the same, but you can also get a forklift in that level and breeze through it pretty nicely, go over a few things you're not supposed to be able to go over. Tip of the Spear had the same layout of the level, but you actually got to drive a Warthog this time, and it just so happened to have several other Warthogs stacked on top of it. This was the first vehicle in the whole game that stuck to the ground and you could drive. Previously, it either flew or it didn't go anywhere. Long Night of Solace had an interesting attribute with the gravity when you were in the walking part of the level. In the very beginning, if you jumped, you kinda stayed up there. It seemed like gravity was reduced to like 1%. Don't know the actual number, just guessing. You also had those friends that you could spawn and kinda make an army of them. That was lots of fun too. Although I did have to wait for it to recharge every time. And then once you got up into space, it was pretty much all the same there too. Except there weren't any Seraphs, and you didn't have rockets. Exodus is where I felt things might have maybe been starting on the downward trend. That was a very difficult level. In fact, I would say it was the hardest in the whole game that you can play as far as you can play. You start with just a little pistol, the Colibri, And the whole level is filled with brutes, and they have the biggest gun that the Covenant know how to wield and carry around with them. I died an absurd amount of times trying to beat that level. Granted, it was on Legendary, I could have gone easy, but no! And I did make it through it. Sort of. I eventually got to a point where it kept crashing. I think it might have been whenever a civilian died, the game crashed, but it's hard to tell because I can't monitor all the civilians all at once. But I got through that part, sort of skipped to the next part. I basically skipped from the top of the elevator to the bottom, and then in that part I fought through the rest, and that was pretty hard as well. And then I got to what should have been the last part. A Falcon came, landed in front of me, and couldn't do anything with it. I tried getting in all the different areas I could. I could only actually get in one seat, couldn't get in the gunner seat, there wasn't a pilot, and it gave me the prompt, but I couldn't pilot it. I tried killing one, and I tried killing all of the soldiers. By the way, all the soldiers were George's. That was a fantastic idea, I thought. Perfect for the idea of a cursed mod. Unfortunately, I tried everything I could think of with the Falcon, and couldn't get to the last section. Even if I loaded the last area, the last checkpoint, it took me to where the Falcon landed, and, well, couldn't get past that point, unfortunately. So then we come to the next level, New Alexandria. Oh, man. So I lost some of my recording, so I couldn't show all of it. But that level, the gimmick is that you have a Falcon, right? But you don't have directions. You don't have a waypoint. You don't know where to go. Okay, not too hard. That would be a good idea for Cursed if it had the rest of the level. I checked every building, flew around for a half hour, and all I got were Banshees spawning randomly, as they do in the level. That's normal. But I never encountered any Marines, or the things you're supposed to make go splody-splode, so I couldn't progress the level, unfortunately. That's where I was starting to see that instead of Cursed, it was leaning a little bit towards Broken, unfortunately. And that made me sad, because it was kind of good before that point. And then we have the package, the level where you go back to Sword Base, but guess what? Dr. Halsey's alive and she has a thingy for you. This level was the exact same as regular Reach, except it had the guns added by the mod, and it was black and white, and everything was muffled. If you shoot a gun, you can't hear the gun, which I didn't think about before is actually kind of important for combat. I guess it's just that audible confirmation that you shot? I don't know. Also, the tank couldn't drive. It could shoot and you'd slide around like you're on roller skates, but I quickly abandoned the tank. It really wasn't very useful. If it could drive, or heck, if it could fly, that would have been great for a cursed idea. Unfortunately, just wasn't working. And then we come to the Pillar of Autumn. It seemed the gimmick of this level was you start it, you run out onto a cliff, and, well, that's the level. There was some kind of joke there about Carter taking you to Disneyland, and because of that, the Pillar of Autumn left without you. But the first time I played, I didn't even get to that before it took me to the rest of it. And the second time I saw, but I guess I didn't get the joke. Shame on me, I guess. I tried loading later checkpoints, and it didn't take too long before things were broken. The second checkpoint just broke. And the third checkpoint, there wasn't a Pillar of Autumn, and no more Covenant arrived after the first batch, so I couldn't proceed. So I guess it was just deliver a joke, and that's the level. And then finally, we come to Lone Wolf, supposedly where the Pillar of Autumn has left, and you're the last one on Reach. Well, the last one that you know of, anyway. Contrary to the regular goal of surviving against Covenant on this level, the new objective was to die. I got a message from DrkSteel's saying that there was supposed to be a gravity hammer somewhere on the level, so you could get up high and die from fall damage, but I never found that, unfortunately. What I did find was boxes. And me knowing a thing or two about stacking boxes, I was able to get up high enough that I could fall and die. So I completed that objective, and we got to see the end cutscene. It seemed exactly the same as a regular game. No changes, no additions, all the same. And that completes the campaign. There were a lot of additions that I did like George having the magenta armor, his name being changed to Georges, really just everything about George. He's a pretty great guy. There were some things, unfortunately, I did not enjoy about the campaign, namely everything to do with Falcons. It seemed like every time there was a Falcon involved, it didn't work. So it's really a mixed bag when it comes to the campaign. It started off pretty good. I liked it. but it seemed like only the first half was good. The last half was just mostly broken. So I'm going to give the campaign a score of 4 out of 10. And then we come to the enemies in the game. Now, instead of talking about each of the different enemies, it's kind of all the same for all of them. There are some different kinds, like grunts. There are a lot of different kinds of grunts. But despite all the different enemies, they didn't really act any differently. They did have the modded weapons, but they just shot them as if they were normal weapons. Heck, the jackals even figured out how to charge up their plasma pistol and let off a nuke. But they didn't know they were letting off a nuke. They just thought they were charging it up, because that's what they do. For enemies, since there weren't really any changes implemented, they were just given different guns, I'm going to give this one 8 out of 10. Wasn't bad, it just wasn't very creative or very different. Next we have gameplay. Playing through the campaign was very interesting since there were so many different weapons and abilities and enemies to deal with, but the enemies were the same, just in different places. Overall, considering the weapons, the enemies, the abilities, the vehicles, and all that, I'd give the gameplay 6 out of 10. Okay, the final section, glitches and bugs. The score on this one's kind of going to be flipped. If it gets 10 out of 10, that means there weren't any problems with it. There weren't any glitches or bugs. 0 out of 10 pretty much means unplayable garbage. And unfortunately, this one kind of went all over the scale. Like I said in the beginning, it was pretty good, but about halfway through, it got pretty bad. The most notable 2 examples were Exodus, because of how ill-equipped you were to deal with the brutes, and the sheer amount of brutes. There were a few points in the level where the game either crashed or simply couldn't continue. I'm not sure if it's intentional that the game crashes when a civilian is killed, but I think that might be a little too far for a mod, even if it's a cursed one. And then we have the Falcon that I mentioned, not being able to progress to the last third of the level because the Falcon is immovable, just doesn't reflect very well on that level. Sorry to say. And then New Alexandria, which was just unbeatable. Besides the Falcon just being generally slow and hard to control, the level was incompletable. Checked all the buildings, nothing. That's a huge problem in my opinion. Surely if someone played through this, they would have noticed that the level couldn't be completed. Due to the glitches and bugs, I'm going to give this section a 3 out of 10. There are just so many glitches and bugs with it. Despite all the good things, there are quite a few bad things. And not just creativity, oh, you didn't get that joke kind of bad things, but things that are definitively not good. Not being able to complete a level is definitively not good, in my opinion. I don't know anyone that likes not being able to complete the level. Okay, so considering all 10 categories that I laid out, we have a total of 62 out of 100. 62%. Depending on what school you go to, that may not be a passing grade. In high school, that would probably be a D. Again, depending on the class in the high school. At a university, that's probably a failing grade. It's certainly not a C, which is really a passing grade. A D is not really a passing grade in the university. With 62 out of 100, I would say this mod definitely has its highlights and good parts, but it also has some not so good parts in it that really become apparent if you play very much of it, especially the last half, like I mentioned. Now, as a comparison to Inferno Plus's mod for Halo Combat Evolved, that mod felt a lot more refined. You could play through the full campaign without too much issue. There were a number of things added into the game. Some weapons had different variations of them, and some enemies had different variations of them. True, there was a level removed. However, it was removed due to bugs and glitches, something that perhaps this mod could have tried for some levels. There was also a lot more creativity, in my opinion, when it comes to the vehicles of Combat Evolved, Cursed. Some of those vehicles flew, some of them spun, and some of them were just different proportions than they normally are. However, they were all useful, and they were all usable. I have not done a full review on Inferno Plus's mod for Combat Evolved to make it cursed. However, I can already say that one would get a much higher score than this mod, simply for being much more playable, refined, and a lot more pleasant surprises in it, especially those D20 grenades. One more thing for gameplay. Because I have to start up the game with anti-cheat disabled, I'm not able to do multiplayer, therefore, I'm not able to do this with more than just me. That's also sad. Alright bosses, I hope I've covered enough things here. I'm sure there are still little things that could be put in here, but I'm sure this is long enough anyway. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to show it by clicking the like button. If you want to see more, click subscribe. And if you want to be really on the ball and updated when things come out, hit that bell button. I wish it actually made a ding sound. Thanks for watching everybody. This is JoeMan543 signing out. Bye bye.